Welcome everyone to this lecture, Boundless Life. The Secret Doctrine is a book written by Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. And in the proem of this book, Blavatsky describes three fundamental propositions. This lecture is about the first proposition, and the two lectures that follow will discuss the other two. So let's dive right in by looking at the text of the first proposition. An omnipresent, eternal, boundless, and immutable principle, on which all speculation is impossible, since it transcends the power of human conception and could only be dwarfed by any human expression or similitude. Well, that's a great start. That actually makes this lecture an impossible task. It transcends the power of human conception and could only be dwarfed by any human expression or similitude. This means that we cannot say anything about the first proposition without harming it in one way or another. But in order to exchange thoughts with each other, we will nevertheless have to use words to convey our thoughts. And that is why we are going to try our best to give it proper expressions in different ways. However, bear this important point in mind during the lecture. Every expression is limited and therefore unable to fully describe the first proposition, the boundless principle. And therefore I have a request. Try to adopt an open and comprehensive mind during the lecture, and try to look beyond or past the words I use in order to pick up the more universal message. Then, together we have the best chance of success. So let's start with the explanation. So, there is a principle that is omnipresent, eternal, boundless, and immutable. So let's start by looking at what is meant by these words. We start with the word principle. When you look up the meaning of the word principle, it means an underlying principle, a foundation. In other words, an all-embracing concept that describes the essence of everything. It defines the basis of everything without being something itself. The principle is not an object. It is also not a living being. It is not something. It is not a boundless object or a boundless being, but points to the boundlessness of all that is. It is not an omnipresent object or an omnipresent being, but it points at the omnipresence of all that is. So this principle or foundation is omnipresent. This means always present everywhere. It is never nowhere. So the principle encompasses everything and everyone and leaves nothing out. It is the underlying foundation of all that is. The basis is everywhere simultaneously, without exception. It is not the case that it is sometimes there and sometimes not. No, it is always everywhere. The principle is eternal, which means that the principle is limitless in time. This results in that there is no time that can pass. There is only eternal duration, which subsequently means that there is no past or future. There is only an eternal now. Eternal also means no death or birth. It is indestructible. So the principle or foundation cannot come into being, nor can it perish. It is eternal and omnipresent. The principle is also boundless, without boundaries, which means that the principle extends in all infinite directions, infinitely. There's no beginning or end to it. How could you indicate the beginning, middle, or end of an infinite rope? It is not possible. The principle is infinite in all ways, and therefore unlimited. It has no limitation. It is beyond anything we can think of. It is beyond any form. The principle is also immutable. It is unchangeable in the sense that we cannot change the principle, but also the principle itself does not change. In other words, the principle is not subject to change. From another perspective, you could also say that the principle encompasses all change. Something that becomes more sensible when you consider that the principle is boundless and omnipresent. Reasoning from that point of view, no change can stand apart from the principle, because all change is included. Perhaps a better expression would be that the principle stands above change. It is beyond change, because it underlies everything. In that case, nothing is truly new, because everything is or was already part of it. Only we sometimes experience things as new. It is similar to that we cannot invent anything. We can only discover things in the light of the immutable principle, because the possibility was already there. So, because the principle is omnipresent, boundless in all ways, it will always be there, no matter what change ever takes place, we can say that it always permeates everything. Everything. All that exists, you, me, the earth, the entire universe and beyond. In other words, the world that we can perceive with our senses, but also everything beyond that. An all-pervading principle, beyond space, time, and form. It is above it. It is the foundation of everything. And that is quite a challenge to comprehend. Blavatsky therefore says that we, as a limited human being, cannot possibly comprehend and express this boundless principle in its entirety. However, and this is a very important point, that does not mean that we should stop thinking about it. We cannot possibly comprehend the limitless reality in its entirety, but we can learn to see and understand infinitely more about it. In this way, we increasingly unravel the mysteries of life and everything around us, and get closer and closer to the theory of everything. So, let's look at what else Blavatsky tells us in the proem of the Secret Doctrine, to make this first proposition a bit more clear to us. Because she later describes the first proposition again, but in slightly different ways. So this first one, we've already discussed it a bit more in detail, but she also calls it one absolute reality, which antecedes all manifested conditioned being. By manifestation and conditioned being are meant all perceptible and imperceptible phenomena, all embodiments and expressions, as all living beings are, for example, a manifestation, but also ideas that can be expressed in words. Actually, she says that there is a fundamental force behind all forms, one absolute reality that precedes everything. It's also the rootless root of all that was, is, or ever shall be. Like the principle, the absolute foundation is boundless. So is the root rootless, that absolute reality that precedes everything. It has no beginning or end. It is beingness rather than being, and is beyond all thought or speculation. If it were being, it would rather refer to something that is, something like a living being, but the principle is not a living being. It rather points to the absolute essence of being, beingness. It is the beingness of everything. Again, we are not talking about a living being or a God, but about an underlying principle, one absolute reality that is the basis of everything, infinitely. Despite it being the foundation of all that lives, including ourselves, it is unthinkable to us. It is beyond all thought or speculation. How is that possible? Well, because like all other manifestations, we are seemingly limited beings. To explain this a little further, we are going to make a small sidestep. So the only reality is boundless unity. Everything consists of the same essence, beyond the largest and smallest aspect of which something is composed. Think, for example, of us human beings. We are infinitely part of something bigger, the Earth, the solar system, the galaxy, and beyond. But we are also infinitely composed of smaller parts, our cells, atoms, and beyond. To limit man to this outer scope alone would not give a complete picture. Inwardly, we are boundless as well. For example, our thinking. From the highest frequencies to which we are able to pick up thoughts, to the lowest frequencies. Those frequencies are also infinitely higher and lower. In manifestation, we perceive existence as a duality. It appears to us as high and low, which we call spirit and matter. But remember, the only reality is one. Therefore, this duality is illusory. Spirit and matter are not different things. They are exactly the same. Matter can actually be seen as crystallized spirit, and spirit as ethereal or subtle matter. It is all the same. And this is a very fundamental thought and important to grasp. Life, as it were, is ordered consciousness. The one being gives, as it were, guidance to another being, is spirit to that other being. While the same one being, the one that is guiding the other, is a building block at the same time for again a different being, is matter for that being. Such as we, as human beings, are building blocks or matter for the solar system. But at the same time, we are a guiding force or spirit for everything that we produce and are composed of. This reality applies to everything that exists. Everything is both building block or matter and guiding force or spirit. Everything is externally and internally connected. Together we are one boundless life, one infinite collaboration, infinitely part of something greater, and infinitely composed of something smaller, one life. We are not always fully aware of this. In manifestation, we take in a position in this boundless reality. We identify ourselves with a limited part of this infinite reality. Sometimes we limit our consciousness to situations that we are in or that have to do with things we personally like or dislike. But we can also expand our consciousness beyond ourselves. Then we identify ourselves with a greater whole, like a family, organization, or perhaps even the whole world. What we see as a whole is subject to growth. We can develop an increasingly bigger picture of this. But because the infinite reality is limitless, we can never fully grasp or comprehend it. This explains Blavatsky's words that it is beyond any human expression or similitude. It is like a fish in an ocean. Does he understand that he lives in water? Does he know what water is? Can he describe water? No, but it is essential to his life. He can't get out of it. He lives within the laws of the ocean. And this is how we live within the one life. We are the boundless life. We are now nearing the end of this lecture. And finally, we can draw some important conclusions from this first proposition of the proem. And that is that some conclusions are that everything is in essence boundless, everything is in essence indestructible, everything is in essence connected, and everything is in essence equal. When we realize that our inner self, our essence, our potential is boundless and indestructible, is equal and connected with life around us, then we have taken the most important and fundamental step. This essential vision forms the basis from which solidarity and compassion flows. Because when you live from this vision, you make choices that are in line with the totality of which you are a part. You have confidence in your fellow man, and you know that he or she can develop and improve because you see the boundless potential in everything and everyone. You treat everyone respectfully because you see that everyone has the same potential and is therefore equal. You deal with your relationships in a sustainable way because you are connected and look beyond this single life. You move along with nature because you realize that you are essentially one with it. In other words, you have adopted a constructive attitude, and with this attitude you support the totality. We are able to shape life with positive strength and be a positive force in the world. With this first proposition, the first step has been taken to build up an idea about the theory of everything, because we can now answer the first important question: what is everything? Everything is boundless in essence, is, was, and always will be. Everything is one in essence, is equal, and has boundless potential. Now we have reached the end of this lecture, and I thank you all, and I hope you all have an inspiring symposium.